A Burundian general says he has ousted President Pierre Nkurunziza. A grounded plane in Accra roars back to life as a trendy new restaurant. And a Picasso painting sets a world record. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. We begin with a major political development in Burundi, where an army general says he had ousted Pierre Nkurunziza as president on Wednesday for seeking an unconstitutional third term in office. Major General Godefroid Niyombare, who was fired by President Pierre Nkurunziza as intelligence chief in February, made the stunning announcement while speaking at a military barracks to reporters. He later told private radio stations that the president has been dismissed and that he will form a committee to restore national harmony and unity. After his declaration, crowds of people streamed onto the streets of Burundi's capital, cheering and singing as soldiers surrounded the state broadcasting building. Earlier in the day, hundreds of protesters marched in Bujumbura and threw stones at policemen as violent clashes broke out. Police at the scene fired tear gas to disperse them. Police also used water cannon and tear gas to disperse a group of protesters. Mr. Nkurunziza, 51, is currently attending a meeting called by regional leaders in Tanzania. Protest organizers have urged the other African leaders to demand that Nkurunziza's bid for a third term is halted. Protesters are urging the president to remain in Tanzania.
If possible, he should stay there in Tanzania. We don't want him. We are tired of him and the things he has done to us. He thinks of us citizens as a cup of tea he can drink up. But let him try and drink us now.
We will stay on the streets until he lets go of the third term. We would prefer to die in the streets, and after we die, he can then rule over the trees and the buildings.
Nkurunziza, who once led a rebel group from the majority Hutu population against the minority Tutsi-led army in the war, has pointed to a constitutional court ruling that said his first term did not count as he was chosen by lawmakers and not voted in. At least 20 people have been killed since unrest erupted more than 2 weeks ago, according to an unofficial count by activists. More than 50,000 people have fled to neighboring states. The UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, said the crisis was heading towards a worst-case scenario that could see 300,000 people fleeing, some to other parts of Burundi and others abroad. Well, for the latest on this developing situation, East Africa correspondent Gabe Josler joins us live by phone from Bujumbura. Gabe, who is in charge in Burundi as we speak right now?
Well, that's the big question we're all trying to figure out at the moment. General Niyombare made his announcement about 3 o'clock local time here, and everybody poured out into the streets celebrating this as a major victory for those who wanted to get rid of President Pierre Nkurunziza. But according to the Burundi presidency, the president is still in charge. There has been no successful coup, and the latest we heard was that the president was returning to Bujumbura this evening, and will be trying to retake control of the streets, I suppose, overnight and going into tomorrow.
But we hear that there's someone else has announced that the airspace has been closed down and there's nobody who is allowed to go in or out of the country. Is that true?
We know that the airport has been closed down to regular commercial flights, that's surrounded, though, by military who are apparently supportive of the president. So if he wanted to return, I'm sure he could find a way to do that. But the city is in a bit of turmoil right now as people try to figure out exactly what's going on. The big question is, of course, whether General Niyombare represents most of the armed forces or a sizable enough faction of the armed forces to actually enforce this coup, or if he just is speaking for himself or for a smaller group.
Now, Gabe, you're there in Burundi. People have been wondering, is this just about the constitutional issue, the third term question, or are there other issues actually fueling this instability?
What people tell us in the streets is that they've been disappointed, of course, with the rule of Pierre Nkurunziza and his political party, which they say are too dominant, that there is too much corruption in the system, that one political party holds all of the jobs and controls too much of the country, and there isn't really a place for the people. So those are the factors that have contributed to the tension here, that have made these protests particularly active. So it's not just about the third term, although that is the number one issue that people bring up when you ask, why are you in the streets, why are you clashing with police? They really don't want to see this third term for the current leader.
Now, we've been seeing people opposed to a third time on the streets. Have there been any that have come on the streets to support Mr. Nkurunziza?
Well, we haven't seen any protests in support of the president, at least not during my time here in Bujumbura. He does, of course, still enjoy support from the police, who are out there confronting the protesters, and then also an armed wing of his ruling party, a youth wing, that have been accused of committing some violent acts and also confronting the anti-Nkurunziza protesters during the last few weeks.
Gabe, thank you very much. East Africa correspondent Gabe Josler reporting live from Bujumbura. Now, for more insights into the unrest in Burundi, I'm joined now by Ilavie Ndura, professor at George Mason University and a native of Burundi. Professor Ndura, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, very disturbing developments in Burundi. So, Professor, did you see this coming?
I did not see it coming this soon, but I knew it would come because people can be held in that kind of limbo without knowing what's going to happen only for so long.
Yes. Now, I did ask our correspondent about what are the other issues.
Yes.
What can you tell us about the issues that Burundians have been dealing with in the last few years?
Well, Burundi has a difficult history, first of all. Any event that occurs sends most Burundians back to the history of conflict, intergroup conflict, of discrimination, of fear, of uncertainty. So I keep wondering myself, because I have collected lots of research data from Burundi after 2005, when I was allowed to go back into the country. The issues are more complex. People had hope that their lives would substantially improve after Nkurunziza took over. In some ways, life did improve a little bit. Peace did return, which people were really hungry for. They were tired of violence. So he brought peace and non-violence to the country for the 10 years. Yeah. But they remained poor.
Yes.
And they remain limited in terms of access to certain services, because access to many opportunities in social services became politicized. And that became, I think, part of the problem.
And you know, the last few weeks has seen some of the most violent demonstrations, but it's not lost on our memory that actually we had demonstrations, protests even last year.
Yes.
Now, some of these issues started way before.
Right.
Why do you think this was allowed to get to where it is today?
Well, I think Pierre Nkurunziza and his supporters may have lost control. Yeah, honestly, that's what I think. I was not on the ground to collect immediate data. But I think either they thought the problem would go away on its own, which would have been a naive way of thinking. When people are in uprisings, they don't come down on their own. And they thought the elections would happen and the problems would go away. And the threat and, you know, outlawing the public demonstrations, they thought people would abide by that law.
Which they did not.
Which
now,
they did not.
We know that Burundi is a country that came from conflict. Do you have concerns that actually the same issues might resurface and Burundi could slide back to where it was 10 years ago?
I do, because my main concern and my main fear, and the fear of many people who follow the events in Burundi very closely, and many people who care about Burundi, is the lack of a political program, a social program, an economic program that could really show the people that their hope is materializing, that they can access social services without having to be politicized, that poverty is being alleviated in some way. So the lack of clear vision, national vision, for me is a major concern.
So do you think it will go back to civilian rule soon, hopefully?
I do hope not. Because my research data, the most positive finding from my research data of the past 10 years is that the majority of the people across ethnic lines, across socio-economic lines, are very, very tired of violence.
Let's just hope for the best. Yes. Professor Ndura, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, Professor Ila V. Ndura is professor at George Mason University and a Fulbright Senior Specialist roster candidate for peace education and conflict prevention. Now to Nigeria. In the wake of advances by Nigeria's military against Boko Haram insurgents in the country's northeast, people displaced during years of violence are trickling back home to find their lives in ruin. Chris Stein reports from the town of Michika.
Homaluka returned home to Michika to a backyard full of dead people. Like most Michika residents, he fled the northeastern town when Boko Haram took it over in September. When he came back, he saw that the insurgents had turned his land into a cemetery.
When we came back, we discovered the house had been destroyed. All of our things had been moved around, and we weren't able to stay here because the house was smelling very bad. So we started looking around to see what the source of the smell was, and we checked in back and saw there was a graveyard over there where they did a mass burial of their fighters.
Michika was one of many towns Nigeria's military lost control of last year as Boko Haram started seizing territory across the northeast. It was recaptured in January as the military, aided by regional troops and foreign mercenaries, pushed the insurgents out of most of the territory they had taken. People are trickling back to see what's left of their livelihoods and loved ones. Mary Johanna Quatri doesn't know where her husband is. He was home when the militants attacked, and she was at church. She managed to flee the town, then kept moving as far south as the Adamawa state capital, Yola, then back to Michika. With nowhere else to go, she now sleeps on the dirt floor of her burnt-out home.
So far, I don't have anything to do. All I do is just find food to cook, and after I'm finished eating, I just go under this tree to lie down in order to survive. I'm trying to make a round hut where I'll be able to stay.
The road to Michika is lined with the evidence of battle between the military and Boko Haram, which overran the region in its campaign to establish strict Islamic law. Here, buildings obliterated by an air raid. There, a bridge destroyed by the militants to stop the military's advance. Locals who assist cars fording this stream, like Polly Cap, say the area's shallow creeks will turn to torrents when the rainy season comes, cutting off towns like Michika.
This is the only road we have so far in this place. If this road is not fixed up, then definitely we're going to face so many challenges. Things will become very difficult for us because there is only one way.
Dozens of towns and villages across the northeast have been damaged as badly as Michika, or worse. A new government is coming in at the end of the month. People here have high expectations that the new administration will do what's necessary to rebuild their lives. Chris Stein for VOA News, Michika, Nigeria.
Here in the United States, investigators are combing through wreckage of a passenger train Wednesday that derailed in the northeastern city of Philadelphia, killing at least 6 people and injuring more than 140 others, several of them critically. The Amtrak Northeast Regional train carrying 243 passengers and crew shook as it went into a curve before tumbling off the tracks Tuesday night as it was traveling from Washington to New York. The derailment sent passengers and luggage flying through the air as the locomotive and 6 cars overturned and ended up in a mass of twisted steel and debris. The mayor of Philadelphia spoke to the media after visiting the scene of the accident.
I've been down on the tracks, on the scene with my staff. It is an absolute disastrous mess. Never seen anything like this in my life, and most personnel will say that as well.
Well, a team from the National Transportation Safety Board is already at the crash site investigating what caused the derailment. Well, now, President Obama's efforts to reach a nuclear deal with Iran and Tehran's involvement in conflicts from Yemen to Syria have heightened concerns among Washington's allies in the Persian Gulf. The U.S. leader will try to allay those concerns when he hosts a summit this week of the 6 Sunni-led member states of the Gulf Cooperation Council. VOA White House correspondent Luis Ramirez reports.
For leaders of the Gulf countries, scenes of Iranian-supported Houthi rebels overrunning Yemen's capital and driving out its U.S.-backed government this year were a sign of the rising threat from Iran, and they come to the summit seeking reassurances of U.S. backing. President Obama's argument is that negotiating a nuclear arrangement with Iran will by itself mean security for them.
I'm convinced that if this framework leads to a final comprehensive deal, it will make our country, our allies, and our world safer.
But America's partners in the Persian Gulf region are not so sure. Yusuf Al-Otaiba, the United Arab Emirates ambassador to the United States, says Gulf leaders want to upgrade their security relations with Washington.
We are looking for some form of security guarantee, given the behavior of Iran in the region, given the rise of the extremist threat. We definitely want a stronger relationship. In the past, we have survived with a gentleman's agreement with the United States about security. I think today we need something in writing. We need something institutionalized.
While no treaty will be signed, President Obama does plan to talk with the Gulf leaders about building up their defense capabilities. It's expected there will be some movement on speeding up weapons sales, setting up a regional defense system against Iranian missiles, and joint military exercises. But President Obama said in an interview with the New York Times in April that the Sunni-led governments in the Gulf also must take into account another threat from some of their own people who are stifled by a lack of political outlets for their grievances. Mr. Obama says the biggest threat facing the Gulf Cooperation Council members may not be from Iran, but from internal dissatisfaction. Mr. Obama's criticism of the Gulf leaders' domestic policies, coupled with his outreach to Iran, has fueled their distrust. For the president, it is now important to make a visible show of support. Along with a dinner at the White House, the leaders will meet at Camp David, the mountain retreat outside Washington that traditionally has been used for intimate and historically important gatherings. Derek Chollet is a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Defense.
For him to meet with the Gulf partners, the Gulf leaders at Camp David has a special symbolism here in the United States and around the world. So it's an important symbol of our commitment to the region.
The United States maintains 35,000 troops in the Gulf region and, like the Gulf nations, wants to stem Iran's destabilizing actions there. While no one expects this week's summit meetings to resolve all distrust and disagreements, there is hope it will be a first step toward rebuilding confidence in the partnership. Luis Ramirez, VOA News, at the White House.
We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, plain eating in Ghana. Stay with us.
This is BizBeat.
If you have a car, lower oil prices means cheaper gas. In the U.S., you now save $10 on a 13-gallon tank from a year ago. But for countries relying heavily on oil exports, the drop means lost revenue. During the 2008 global financial crisis, Africa was spared major damage, mostly because of its underdeveloped financial markets. But today, the continent's a victim of plunging oil prices. Nigeria and Angola are the largest oil-producing countries, and oil companies there will now have to consider if they want to move ahead with billion-dollar projects that need higher oil prices to make a profit. And while most consumers enjoy the lower prices at the pump, social safety nets in less diversified economies are at risk. Less money for HIV prevention, for example, less buying power for imported goods, and loss of revenue for governments fighting extremist groups like Boko Haram. What's an economy to do? Economists say become more diversified. For VOA's BizBeat, I'm Philip Alexio.
Welcome back. Now, do you like airplane food? I don't. But dinner on this plane in Ghana is just so different. Here's Africa 54's Paul Diho with the details. Paul.
That's right, Vincent. If you happen to be in a Ghanaian capital and you're looking for a restaurant or to have dinner, or you've never been on an airplane, but you are curious about what it feels like to eat on a plane, well, ask no more. An airplane from the country's defunct airline, Ghana Airways, is now a restaurant. As the saying goes, one man's trash is another man's treasure. In this particular case, that statement could not be truer. Once upon a time, this was Ghana Airways. But now, this national treasure has been turned into the state-of-the-art Latente DC10 restaurant. Is one of the premier restaurants in Accra, Ghana, where locals and tourists come to taste authentic Ghanaian dishes. Restaurant owner Vivian Awu-Brum is credited for coming up with this innovative idea after she outbid other contenders with different ideas.
I mean, it was tough. You have to do a technical bid and then the financial bid. So when putting everything, my artistic impression of the way the restaurant will look like, and then the financials, how much we'll be making from the restaurant, the events and all that, brought me up to win this bid.
Located opposite the Marina Shopping Mall near Ghana's International Airport, the restaurant is attracting a lot of clients. There is also no need to worry about Accra's hot and humid climate. The restaurant is fully air-conditioned with a unique ambience that reflects the Latente brand. It has a seating capacity of 118, plus features a live DJ.
The expectations are high. We are doing African dishes, we needed to put some international twist to it to make it up there, not like the local dishes that are made in our local restaurants. So you have variety of dishes and the ambience, and like you can see today, the ambience and the food, the services just on point, and people like it, so they recommend people to come here a lot. The eatery is where many locals get their first taste of what it's like to dine on an airplane. John Michael is among a group of 25 people who are visiting from outside the country.
I'm here with my family. We enjoy the environment, we enjoy the plane, restaurant in the plane. It's very good.
What would you say about the food?
Oh, very good, very good. I like it. It's like at home. Yes.
Raymond Baba is another customer who shares the same sentiment.
I heard of this place, and today I want to discover it myself.
Paul says he had previously used Ghana Airways countless times, about 15 years ago. But today he brought his family for dinner.
People would think that, no, this plane cannot fly anymore. So when we are flying, sometimes like Lebanon to Ghana, it is just something that people will come and stand by just to see how this plane will take off.
The chairs and tables have been redesigned to meet the high operational standards with separate washrooms for male and female customers. Sefako Gibum manages the restaurant.
We have to welcome our customer, let them feel at home so that they can even sit down, relax and eat.
The Latente DC10 restaurant has great gardens for outside catering, parties and wedding receptions. In my next report, I will feature a Ghanaian woman who quit her corporate job in the United States and moved back to West Africa to launch her lifestyle brand of natural products. Vincent, back to you.
Great stuff, Paul, there. Well, it's time for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. Well, it's a record breaker. More on the most expensive painting ever sold at an auction. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines.
In Burundi, soldiers surround state broadcaster building in the capital Bujumbura amidst conflicting reports of president's dismissal. In Sudan, the Khartoum government claims its forces dealt Darfur insurgents a knockout blow. In Nigeria, President-elect Muhammadu Buhari faces a myriad of challenges, including shaking off the title of dictator. In the UK, British Interior Minister says that some of the migrants rescued from the Mediterranean Sea will have to return to Africa. Finally, in Madagascar, authorities roll out interactive whiteboard learning aids to boost learning in their schools.
That's it for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. Apple goes green in China. The high-tech giant recently announced new programs to manage sustainable forests and expand their efforts in renewable energy. The company's focus on China continues to grow as the firm captures more and more of the world's largest smartphone market. In 2015, for the first time ever, more iPhones were sold in China than in the U.S. Apple CEO Tim Cook told Chinese state media that the company is so serious about its new feature, Apple Pay, it's in talks with e-commerce giant Alibaba. Some analysts believe an Alibaba-Apple deal would be a win for both companies, with opportunities to reach more Chinese and U.S. consumers. Well, next up, saying goodbye to Uncle Sam. More than 1,300 Americans living abroad gave up their citizenship in the first 3 months of this year alone. It's a new record for people who have had enough of paying U.S. taxes from abroad and don't want the risk of being hunted down by the Internal Revenue Service. Singer Tina Turner is one famous American who ditched her citizenship for a life in Europe. And Facebook co-founder Eduardo Severin gave up his passport to live and work in Singapore. Unlike most countries, the U.S. taxes citizens on all incomes, no matter where it is earned or where they live. Hopefully, these new ex-Americans know it's illegal to renounce your U.S. status simply to get out of paying taxes. Well, and finally, a Picasso masterpiece smashes an auction record. The vibrant, multi-hued Women of Algiers has become the most expensive painting to sell at auction, going for a whopping $179 million at Christie's in New York. 11 minutes of prolonged bidding from telephone buyers preceded the final sale for much more than its pre-sale estimate of $140 million. The 1955 painting was among 2,000 masterpieces from the 20th century. Christie's offered in a curated sale titled Looking Forward to the Past. The Picasso the Picasso prize included the auction house's premium, and all the buyers elected to remain anonymous, and that is what is trending today. Well, that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show program, Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings today, Break Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us here in Washington, have a good night.
Music is something that brings people together.
Music educates, it motivates, it's a bridge.
Music. Ali.
On
VOA.
I am Sheka Sali, host and senior editor of VOA's international call-in talk show, Straight Talk Africa. The issues that we discuss are pertinent to most people on the African continent.